Hello everyone and welcome back to TowerGate. It is TowerGate day number 1125, 1125, Thursday, May the 7th, 2020. Thank you so much for tuning in. Okay, we have a few things to talk about today, so let's get right to it. Well, I've had a chance now to listen to that interview with a rather lengthy interview with George Papadopoulos and his wife Simona with Sarah Carter. And I'll point out a couple of the interesting things that I noticed. A lot of information there we've covered a lot, but there was a few things there that were confirmed, not so much new, but confirmed. So let's just go through a couple of those things and then we'll move on. I thought it was pretty interesting. This is in his book. I've heard it mentioned before, but it kind of takes on a different meaning now because of where we are, from where we were when we first heard this, which is that Papadopoulos told Sarah Carter that his first contact, the first time that he was contacted, the first time that the Australian government reached out to him was 3 weeks before he first had contact with Alexander Down the Hatch Downer. Now, that raises a lot of interesting questions, because keep in mind, at this point, Papadopoulos is a unpaid campaign volunteer. He's not a big name around Washington. No one really even knows who he is. But somehow, Australian government officials know who he is. And this is 3 weeks before he has this meeting with Downer. And this would also be before he even wrote the article that was critical of David Cameron, which we are told is the reason why Downer wanted to talk to Papadopoulos. And in these early contacts with these Australian officials, and particularly with Downer, the thing that troubled them most about Trump was his support for TTP and Brexit, which is exactly what the Brits were concerned with. So what this shows you is that there was obviously some sort of coordination between British government officials and Australian government officials. And who is the guy who links the two together? It's Alexander Down the Hatch Downer. He was Australia's foreign ambassador to the UK. He spends a lot of time in the UK, despite the fact that he's Australian. And even though he's no longer a government official, he still spends a lot of time in the UK. Of course, we know he's on the board of Hackloot. Of course, we know that he spoke 2 times at Cambridge during the summer and spring of 2016, stood at the very same podium and sat right next to Stefan Halper. And of course, we know that Mifsud had traveled to Australia at the exact same week that Jimmy the Weasel Comey paid a visit to Australia. And then, after the whole Russiagate thing blew up, James Clapper takes a trip to Australia. So, in the larger picture, as Papadopoulos points out, in American politics, in the course of a general election, there will be foreign policy issues that will be in play, and there will be countries which will be talked about a lot, primarily Russia, China, Israel, the UK. But we rarely see where Australia ever plays into the political picture in the United States during a political campaign. And this is not to be disrespectful to Australia or Australians, who I like all of them who I've met. I think they're great people. And I don't want to say something and sound demeaning to them, but quite honestly, in the larger scheme of things, in a political election, or really at any time in America, Australia really is not on our radar screen. Now, maybe that's because they're a friendly ally, and I assume we don't have a lot of, I'm assuming we have some trade with Australia, and we have some dealings with Australia, but they're just not a major player, in, politics in America. We visit there, they visit here, we have a friendly relationship, obviously, but you don't think about Australia having a major, play in an American election or even in American politics on a day-to-day basis, unless some unique situation pops up, like the Falklands Islands or something like that. So it is very curious why the Australians would be so interested and want to be so involved in the 2016 presidential elections. Clearly, they, like a lot of foreign countries, weren't happy with a lot of the things Trump was campaigning on. Trade and things and such. Not wanting to go along with those sorts of deals anymore. Would put him at odds with globalists. And we have to assume that, based on what Papadopoulos is saying, that the type of Australians who were reaching out to him at the time were representing the globalist position on behalf of Australia, these Australian officials, embassy officials. And then, of course, he has the meeting with Down the Hatch Downer. Papadopoulos does reiterate that Durham personally interviewed Down the Hatch Downer. Every indication that we have had, with the exception of a few recent comments by a former Australian government official, where he kind of throws Downer under the bus. But other than that, it doesn't look like the Australian government has been 100% cooperative, we'll say. And of course, we can assume, based on interviews that Downer has done, that Downer likely was not truthful with John Durham. And maybe that's because Downer believes that the government of Australia will work out some sort of a deal to keep it quiet. Maybe he believes that there's no one who can prove that he's lying to Durham. Or he just doesn't care if he lies to Durham, because he doesn't think that there's anything Durham will likely be able to do to him, unlike, say, an American or something. But I would think that Durham and the Attorney General, if they find out that Downer lied to Durham, probably would have some recourse. So, not 100% sure, but the general consensus is at this point, based on what we've heard from Downer after the fact, is that he must have lied to Durham, because what he's telling the press is that he essentially told Durham that he was not acting as a spy or was not coordinating with anyone to set up Papadopoulos or anything like that, and he wasn't involved in any kind of activities like that. That's his position. But, I mean, everyone knows that that is a lie. A guy who's as heavy a hitter as Alexander Downer, in the circles he travels in, would have no interest whatsoever in sitting down with Papadopoulos for any reason. And so there has to be something else going on. And the fact that he has these close relationships with the Clintons, Hakluyt, and British intelligence people, and a lot of the creepy characters that we talk about here all the time, it's just very hard to believe that it's all purely coincidental. So, my guess is that Durham probably knows that Downer was lying to him. He may have even discovered who Downer was working for. I'm guessing that Halper, or possibly Priestep, who was over in London during the week that all this was going down, one of those two likely were working with Downer. And of course, when you're dealing in intelligence type things, we know that these intelligence officials even though Downer claims he's not one of those. But these people lie, okay, even when they're under oath, because they believe that because they're in the intelligence business and they're working on things that they consider to be state secrets, that they are then authorized to lie. It's okay to lie because I'm in the intelligence business and that's what we do. We lie. But we're lying for good reasons. We're doing it for you. So when I sit here and lie to your face, it's for your own benefit. It's for your own good. That is how people like Downer think. I don't think that Durham thinks that way, and I doubt that Barb will. So we'll just have to keep watching and see what happens with Downer and the role that the Australian government played in the coup. And again, when Papadopoulos talks about the fact that when the two issues that seem to be brought up over and over again, whenever these British and Australian officials were bumping into Papadopoulos all throughout the spring and summer of 2016, the two issues that seemed to dominate what they were wanting to talk about in regards to Trump's policies was that they were extremely unhappy with Trump's policy position on Brexit and on the TPP. That's what was really driving them. Of course, we learned from this interview that Durham has interviewed Papadopoulos. Therefore, we can assume that he's told Durham all about Mr. Twill and the $10,000. That was another attempted frame-up. So you can bet that that's probably why Durham brought in this prosecutor from New York who specializes in racketeering, because he would be an expert in tracking the movement of money. And that's the one major, and the only one I can really think of in this whole deal where we had actual money and more or less a bribe or some dirty money being thrown into the equation. It was with that little thing that went down in Israel with Papadopoulos and this Mr. Twill giving him the $10,000. So it's likely that that is what Durham has this New York prosecutor working on who specializes in RICO. He's an expert at tracking the movement of money. We can assume that that's what he's working on. So there we go. Pretty good interview. You can listen to it. There's nothing really terribly new, but it's a good interview. So if you get a chance, Sarah Carter and the Papadopoulos interview. Now let's move on to the next big story from yesterday, which I loved reading, and I'm sure most of you did too if you've read it, which is that, as you know, when Devin Nunes was head of the House Intelligence Committee, prior to Schiff taking over, they had interviewed 53 people. And those 53 interviews had to go through a declassification process and had to be, redacted if there was certain things that had to be taken out. That process was completed over a year and a half ago. But yet, Schiff has failed to release any of the 53 transcripts. And the reason's quite simple. It's because not a single one of those people could offer any evidence that there was any Trump-Russia collusion. None of those things help Schiff's case. So he's been blocking those releases. As we know, Jim Jordan and another member of Congress just sent a 6-page letter to Schiff telling him he needs to release those transcripts. Now, what's funny here is that Rick Grinnell has now entered the fray. And Rick Grinnell has sent a letter which he also made public. He made it public to the media. This is why I love Rick Grinnell. He doesn't do things like behind the shadows. He does it, especially as he's having these battles with Schiff, and then he releases the letters that he writes to Schiff so we can all read them. And so he sent this letter to Schiff, which he has released. You can read it online, where he basically says, yeah, we declassified that stuff over a year and a half ago. There was a unanimous vote in your committee to release all transcripts, but you're sitting on these transcripts. And just to let you know, it is time for you to release the transcripts. And Grinnell says, if you don't do it, I will. So now the latest on this is that Schiff's, I guess, lieutenants there on his committee have responded by saying that they're going to go back and look to make sure that the necessary redactions were put in. And this is kind of a delaying tactic. Yeah, we have to go back and look and make sure that the ODNI properly redacted things so there's nothing in there. Of course, that would be a call for the ODNI, not Schiff's committee. So this is kind of a way, I guess, of slowing down or stonewalling it. But Grinnell's made it perfectly clear that he wants those 53 transcripts released. And of course, if Schiff doesn't release them quickly, Grinnell will. And if Schiff goes and redacts a bunch of things that the ODNI did not redact, then Grinnell will likely release their version of a much less redacted copy of these transcripts. So, well done, Rick Grinnell. He is giving Schiff fits, and it's great. It's fantastic. Now, here are the 53 transcripts that we're waiting on. Rinat Akhmechan, Steve Bannon, Andrew Brown, Michael Caputo, John Carlin, Thomas Catan, one of the owners of Fusion GPS, James the Unwitting Idiot Clapper, Sam Clovis, Dan Coates, Michael Cohen, Rick Dearborn, Diana Denman, Mark Elias, Boris Epstein, who was at one time believed to be one of the sources of the dossier, Peter Frisch, another owner of Fusion GPS, Mike Gaeta, Steele's FBI contact in Rome, Michael Goldfarb, Rob Goldstone, J.D. Gordon, Rona Graff, Sean Henry of CrowdStrike, Hope Hicks, Ike Kavaladze, who was, of course, one of the translators in the Trump Tower meeting, David Kramer, twice they interviewed him, Jared Kushner, Corey Lewandowski, twice they interviewed him, Get Back Loretta Lynch, Andy McCabe, Mary McCord, Alexander Nix, Brad Parscale, Waleed Ferez, John Podesta, 2 times they interviewed him, Samantha Power, Ben Rhodes, Susan Rice, John Safran, Anatoly Semechornov, another one of the translators at the Trump Tower meeting, Felix Sater, Keith Schiller, Jeff Sessions, Roger Stone, Jake Sullivan, Michael Sussman, Matt Tate, Trump Jr., and Silly Sally Yates. Now, what's important to note here is that these 53 transcripts have likely already been read by Durham or his investigative team. These interviews conducted in the House Intelligence Committee back in 2017 were conducted under oath, which means, and remember, Nunes was the head of the committee at the time, which means that they were probably asking real questions. So the question you now have to wonder about is how many of these people lied under oath? Because remember, these people lie to Congress all the time. But now that Durham is on the case, any of the statements that these people made under oath are under oath statements, which can be then brought into court. And if they tell Durham something different in front of a grand jury or in a sit-down with their attorneys and his people, he's essentially got them lying under oath, lying to Congress. That's under oath. That's a crime. You can be prosecuted for that if you have a real prosecutor to do it. And Durham is a real prosecutor. So We expect that we will be getting the release of these transcripts either by the Bug-Eyed Fool or by Rick Grinnell very soon. And of course we know that Durham has likely already looked at all of these transcripts, and he's probably already found where some of these people have lied. Now what's pretty interesting here is that you don't see Jimmy the Weasel Comey and you do not see John Brennan, which tells me that they probably refused to come in and testify, because you know they were subpoenaed. And there may be others. Yesterday, the Department of Justice released a less redacted version of the second scope memo, written by, of course, Rodenstein, Rod Rodenstein, on August the 2nd of 2017. Keep that date in mind, August the 2nd of 2017. He wrote the second scope memo, which authorized the targeting of Carter Page, Paul Manafort, George Papadopoulos, Michael Flynn, and one other unknown individual. Now, because Rodenstein did this second scope memo on August 2nd, 2017, we know it was 7 months after he, the DOJ, the FBI, Uncle Bob the Executioner, the whole crew knew that the dossier had been debunked, that Christopher Steele had been exposed as a fraud, that Michael Flynn did nothing wrong, that Papadopoulos was not did not commit a FARA violation, and that everyone was clean. There was no real Russia collusion. It was all a hoax, a smear campaign paid for by Hillary. They knew all this, but yet Rodenstein authorized these investigations anyway. And he states right there in the letter that it's an investigation into Trump and his campaign and his administration, of which Rodenstein and all these people are serving. It specifically shows that Rodenstein was giving them the authorization to target Manafort for Russia collusion, issues with the Black Ledger, and other financial crimes. Papadopoulos was for Russia collusion and FARA violations. Michael Flynn, Russia collusion, making false statements, and FARA violations. And of course, Carter Page, Russia collusion. So they state specifically here, now in the Flynn case, they don't say anything about the Logan Act. It's Russia collusion. So, and FARA violations. So, I don't know how Rodenstein and the DOJ and the FBI slither out of this one. They knew at this time, this is August the 2nd of 2017 when he writes a scope memo, by which time they've 6-7 months earlier, they knew there was no Russia collusion. It was all a hoax. Very, very damaging. And it should also be noted, too, something I didn't mention when I was talking about Papadopoulos, something else he told Sarah Carter, which kind of plays into this here, is that Papadopoulos says that just about the same time, in that same time period where Michael Wolff had released had texted his girlfriend the Carter Page FISA warrant, it was right at that same time that Papadopoulos was contacted by 2 major news organizations who told him that there was a FISA on him. Okay, let's move on to some other news. It looks like Madame Botox was on MSNBC, and she was again asked about Burisma Joe, and she is now taking the position that that issue, as far as she's concerned, that matter, as far as is no longer up for discussion with her. It's a closed issue, and she told MSNBC that we need to elect Joe Biden as president because of his integrity and vision. Integrity and vision. If they try to elect Joe Biden based on integrity and vision, he's going to get his ass kicked. Those would not be the two issues I'd run on if I were him. No. Integrity and vision are not going to be the two hallmarks of that campaign. I can assure you of that. We had James O'Keefe and Project Veritas busting another fake news organization doing more fake news. This time they busted CBS. CBS, apparently what they did was a couple weeks ago they ran a segment where they went to one of these drive-by coronavirus testing stations in Michigan. And what they did was just to stage it and make it look like there was a lot more going on there than what was really going on, was that they actually had taken some of the medical people that worked there and asked them to get in their cars and get into the line, because they would do these like drive-up tests where you drive up and they put the thing in your mouth and do a test right there on the spot. Well, there wasn't very many cars in line, so it didn't look very good for the news story. So they actually got the medical people working there, and maybe some others, to get in their cars to pull into the line so that when they did their story, they could show a line of cars to make it look like there was a lot more people using this drive-up testing than actually were. And since then, of course, we've had multiple reports across the country where these drive-up testing stations that we were told we had to have are literally empty. People are just not even going to them. They're set up all over the country. Yet, nobody seems to be interested in the drive-up stations. Now, it appears that when O'Keefe first informed CBS of the situation, they basically wouldn't admit it, but wouldn't deny it, so they'd get back to him. They never have gotten back to him, but they did pull that video of that segment from CBS. Busted. Now keep in mind, there were a couple actual real cases of people who got stuck in that long line of cars for the setup for the news story, and there was also the medical people who should have been inside doing their jobs, taking care of sick people who were pulled off the job to do this. So it was just another fake news segment by CBS News. Well, there's a lot of people right now involved in the coup who have a lot of problems, most of them legal. And one of the people I think that's really going to be focused on here in the not-too-distant future is this Brandon Van Grack. This is a horribly corrupt individual. And because he was the lead on this Michael Flynn case, there are certain statements that this guy has made regarding the Brady material, the material that's now coming out, that he said did not exist. And apparently there are 17 actual statements that he has made in court to the judge about the fact that there was no other Brady material or whatever. And I have just a couple of them right here, with dates and exact statements he made in court. In October of 2019, Van Grack told the court that, quote, the government is not in possession of Brady evidence in the Flynn case. He also said the government has not affirmatively suppressed evidence in the Flynn case. He also said, quote, at the time of Flynn's interview, the FBI was engaged in a legitimate investigation of Trump-Russia collusion, which he would have known was bullshit. And I understand there's a total of 17 statements that he's made like that during this Flynn case, where he's told the judge lies about Brady material and other things. Horribly corrupt individual, and we know now that Durham is looking very closely at the way this case was handled. And I would say it's very possible, if not likely, that Brandon Van Grack and a couple of the other people on his team that were working on the Flynn case could very likely themselves be facing criminal charges. Or certainly Flynn, when he is fully exonerated, will be able to sue Van Grack in a civil suit and will likely fare very well. Van Grack would likely settle out of court. I don't know how much money Van Grack has, but when Flynn gets done with him, he won't have any. And Obviously, he'd be disbarred. I have to think at the very least he's going to be disbarred and never to be able to practice law again. He should never be anywhere near a courtroom again. This guy is exactly the type of person you do not want serving as a federal prosecutor. He is corrupt as hell. And I do hope that Durham, now we know this is Durham's pet peeve, this is the thing that people tell us really sets Durham off, is exactly this type of stuff. So let's hope that he brings justice to this bastard who tried to, in fact did, destroy Michael Flynn's life. There's very interesting rumor going around the internet. There's no real, as far as I can find, corroborating evidence of it. It's just one of them things that gets passed around that you never know where it starts. It's just people start talking about it and it makes its way around. But I'm telling you about this because of a statement that Trump made not too long ago at that Trump rally in Piedmont, North Dakota. So Trump is giving a rousing rally in Piedmont, North Dakota. It was like 30,000 people in this place. It was one of them really, really great rallies. I think they're all really good, but this was one of the ones that the next day people were like, wow, that was a smoking rally. Trump was on fire that night. And something Trump said that night at the Piedmont rally is different than anything he said before in regards to the rotten Reverend Clinton and her crimes. Many times he's commented that she's crooked, that she should be in jail and all this kind of thing. But at the Piedmont rally, Trump said that the rotten Reverend Clinton will be in jail by the end of the year. And he was talking 2020. Hillary Clinton will be in jail by the end of the year, and he's talking about 2020. He's never said that before. He had said that she should be in jail, that he would put her in jail, and all these other things. But he's never made a factual statement saying that Hillary Clinton will be in jail by the end of the year. So that's different. And now, with this rumor that's going around, and it's really two different rumors. One rumor is that John Durham has all of the rotten Reverend Clinton's emails. That he has gained access to all of her emails. He's got them. Including the one she thought she bleach bitted or acid washed or whatever term you want to use. Got rid of, destroyed, however you want to look at it. One rumor is that Durham has got all of the rotten Reverend Clinton's emails. And that there's a really good reason why she wanted those emails destroyed. Because they do expose tremendous amounts of corruption with the Clinton Foundation. And there is another report that Durham has a couple of his people on his team looking at the Clinton Foundation and apparently some shady deals, corrupt deals that they were involved in with this deal they had where they were supposedly providing money to foreign countries for vaccines for various diseases, and that there may be some criminal fraud that he has uncovered there. So we don't know. Again, this is in the rumor mill, but when you look at the statement Trump made in Piedmont, North Dakota, that Hillary Clinton would be in jail by the end of the year, and then you hear about the fact that Durham, because I didn't know that Durham was looking into any of the Clinton stuff. I thought he just, probably accepts that was, a cover-up and everything else, but I thought he wasn't really looking so much into Clinton stuff, but apparently he is. So it's being reported. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'll be back tomorrow with more TowerGate. See ya. Bye.